everyone, and welcome to another video. You may be wondering why we are posting on a Friday instead of a Monday, but that is because we are participating, or we are going to try to participate in BOOKMAS. We don't know if we will successfully complete it, but we are hoping to. So if you don't know, BOOKMAS is kind of like Vlogmas. It is just a video every day leading up to Christmas, and we are going to be doing 23 videos. This is very ambitious for us because we are used to only posting one a week, but we have everything planned out and we're really hoping we can do it.
So for day one of BOOKMAS, we are going to be doing a November wrap-up. So I will start with the first book I read, which was A Swiftly Tilting Planet by Madeline L'Engle. And this was on my fall TBR, which I didn't successfully finish, but I did read a couple of them. And this is book 3 in the Wrinkle in Time series. I don't know if that's what it's called, but the Time Quintet series. And I gave this, let's see, what did I give this? I gave this 2.5 stars. This one was not as enjoyable to me as book 2 was earlier this year, I think. It was just, I did not follow along all of the characters, and I didn't really enjoy the characters. I just felt like they were very, I don't know what the word is, but they were just kind of so smart that I looked down on the normal person, and I just didn't enjoy that very much. And mainly, I just felt like I couldn't figure out what was happening, and maybe another time I'll read it and understand more.
The first book that I read in November is His Last Bow by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't have a whole lot to say about this. It's just a really solid, good Sherlock Holmes book. I always enjoy reading Sherlock Holmes. I finished this in one of our vlogs. If you would like to go watch that, I talk a little bit more about it. I liked all the stories in this collection, but there were a few that stood out to me, and it's kind of crazy that I am almost finished with Sherlock Holmes. I only have one more book to go, and then I'll have read all the stories, which is really exciting, but also a little bit sad.
Next I read The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross, and I talked about this as well in our fall vlog. Yeah. This is a YA fantasy story about a girl who is kind of bribed into this really prestigious school where you pick one of 5 talents and you've got to study that for 7 years. But as she is there, she can just never stick with one, and she never feels like she is good enough for this school. Eventually, she ends up kind of going on the path of being adopted by this kind of mysterious guy, and she ends up being a major part in the plot to getting a queen back on the throne, the rightful heir. So I actually enjoyed this one more than I expected to. I gave it 4 stars. I just thought it was a really solid story. The characters were well fleshed out, and I enjoyed the stakes and the questions it brought up. I would recommend this as a solid YA book if you're in the mood for a fantasy.
The next book that I read is Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen. You've probably heard me talk about this 4,000 times, but I finally finished this book. I started this back in June or July, which is a really long time to read such a short book, but I just kept putting it down, and I'm just not much of a nonfiction reader, but I finally finished it. So I've talked about this quite often, but I really enjoyed this, and it was really helpful and made me stop and think about the thoughts that I'm thinking. It helps you take your thoughts captive and figure out how to replace the bad ones with better ones.
Next I read The Selection by Kiera Cass because a friend didn't recommend it, but she wanted me to read it, so I did, and I gave this book 2 stars. I had originally given it 3, and then the more that it sat with me, I ended up giving it a lower rating. So this is about America Singer, who is a 5 in the society ranking. So if you are like a 1 would be the highest, and I think like an 8's the lowest or something like that. And every time there is a new heir to the throne and he comes of age or whatever, they will do this selection where he will pick from like 34 girls to be his bride, and she becomes one of those. And it was just a mediocre YA book. It used to be really popular. I don't even know when. 2012 is when it's written. And there was no substance to it. It was just kind of bad writing, honestly. I would not really recommend this series.
The next book that I read is The Shining Company by Rosemary Sutcliffe, and this was a part of my fall TBR, and I gave this one 5 stars. So this book is based on a poem that is, I think, believed to be one of the earliest Welsh poems, but I'm not exactly sure. It is historical fiction and it follows Prosper, and he ends up becoming a shield bearer that is about to fight in a war. When I was gathering my thoughts to talk about this book, I was reading some reviews, and someone said in a review that the author speaks in an almost matter-of-fact way about tragic things, and I think that was really true, and that was also something that I really enjoyed about this book. So I don't love like super emotional main characters, so that was one thing I really liked about this. It's just such sad and tragic story, but it also never loses hope. And Prosper in this book, it's quite short, but he grows quite a lot, and I really enjoyed all of his relationships with his friends and with all the knights, and just, it's a book that's just full of loyalty and friendship and hope. And I just really, really enjoyed this book. I think you should give it a try, and then you will probably find out if you like non-emotional books.
Next, I read The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This is a YA book by a Korean author, I believe, and it sounds like nothing I would like. Let me just read a little bit about what this is about. So, deadly storms have ravaged Mina's homeland for generations. Floods sweep away entire villages while bloody wars are waged over the few remaining resources. Her people believe the sea god, once their protector, now curses them with death and despair. In an attempt to appease him, each year a beautiful maiden is thrown into the sea to serve as the sea god's bride, in the hopes that one day the true bride will be chosen and end the suffering. So, basically what happens is the girl that Mina's brother loved is to become the bride that year, and Mina just can't let her brother go through that, so she decides to cast herself into the water instead. And basically what happens is she finds out that there's this whole other world going on, and the sea god is actually a confused and tired person that just doesn't even know what's happening and is not this mighty powerful person they all assumed, and there's just lots more going on than what seemed to be. I give this book 4 stars. This again was just a really solid YA story, and the cover is just really nice, and I loved the depth to the story, the character's love for her family, and just all she was trying to do to save them. And even though I'm not into the whole like gods and goddesses and all that kind of stuff, I was really surprised by this story.
The next book that I read is Yours, Constance by Emily Hayes. This is another one on my fall TBR, and I really had no idea what this was about. I knew that it was historical fiction and it had some fantasy, but there's actually not much fantasy in here at all. There's a lot, it talks a lot about fairies, but there's barely anything about them. But anyway, this is very much in the style of Great Gatsby, but the story is completely different. The main character, Constance, is kind of like a 1920s stereotype, but like not in a bad way. I don't know. She goes to parties like every night, but she's just kind of like empty inside, and she's just kind of like looking for something to fill her up, but she never finds it. And her sister had died recently, and she really doesn't care. She's just more mad because it's given the family an inconvenience. So the book starts off with a famous magician disappearing after he has been arrested for the murder of his father, and his sister is then left with an enormous fortune. So Ella, who is his sister, becomes the center of attention at all of the parties. Constance notices her at the parties and sees that she genuinely cares about people, and then she also notices something kind of amiss. So that's kind of how the story starts. I started this book not knowing what to expect, but I finished it knowing I had gained something. I'm just not exactly sure what it was. Another reviewer on Goodreads, Morgan Giesbrecht, said, "With mystery, murder, and satisfying twists, Emily crafted a heart-moving story of loss, grief, the meaning of living, and finding beauty in the ashes, all while set against the glittery background of a Gatsby-esque era." I just really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 stars, but I feel like I should change it to 5. This just really touched me in a way. It's really short. I related to Constance quite a bit, and I just really, really enjoyed it.
Next, I read Read On by Brandon Sanderson and Jancy Patterson. I've talked about this book so many times, you don't even have to know that I liked it. I did give it 4 stars though, in case you're watching. Yeah, I did mention this in our tag.
Yes.
Yes, I did. I mentioned this in our tag because had been currently reading it at that time. Just to recap what it is about Alanik, a being from a different planet who comes onto the planet to try to make an alliance with them against the superiority.
And this is a
novella. Yeah. This is the second novella in the Skyward Flight series, or whatever it's called. So, yes, I really, really enjoyed this. I talked about most of the reasons why I enjoyed it in that tag, but I just really enjoyed it. So, that's all you need to know. You better read the series.
The last book that I listened to was The Giver by Lois Lowry. I listened to this, like I said, and I listened to it today. It was so short, but that's kind of the reason why I listened to it. I've been wanting to read this series again, mostly because I never finished it. I never finished this series. I think I read 3 out of 4 books, and I just never finished it for some reason, and I can't remember it
The fourth one's like the best. No, the third one's the best, but the fourth one's pretty.
This one, I liked it, but it just didn't wow me. I kind of expected it to, because I just remember loving this when I read it. Maybe that was because I hadn't read very many books at the time, but I liked it, but it was just kind of not very much happened.
Yeah. They get better as you go along.
Mm-hmm. It's a dystopian about Jonas, who is living in this world where you kind of learn about it as you read it. It's everything's regulated, and you're assigned a spouse, and then you're assigned children, and yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I am looking forward to rereading the other ones.
Next, I read The House on Foster Hill by Jamie Doe Wright, another book on my fall TBR, and I gave this one 2.5 stars. So this is a dual timeline story, and the modern day timeline is about Kane, who is this woman whose husband died, and she is just convinced that he was murdered, but no one will believe her. So she ends up just getting away from her life in San Diego and moving to a small town where her grandparents.
Her grandma or somebody, maybe great aunt. Her grandma's closer or something. I thought it was my grandma's house. Or was that? No, her grandmother lived in that town.
No, she somehow had roots in this town. So she goes there, and of course, she's trying to renovate this house, and it's horrible, and in walks whatever his name is. We have to put it on screen because it's super generic, but whatever his name is, he has to come, and he volunteers at the animal shelter. He is a therapist. He helps out with the really nice lady who works at the gas station's daughter, and he decides that he's just going to help her with her house. So there's that, and they end up uncovering a mystery about her heritage and about the house and all of the mystery that's going on with it. And the past time period was about Ivy, who witnessed the murder of someone, and basically she is convinced that she has a baby somewhere, and she must find it to take care of it. So anyway,
she has a baby?
That the girl who died, sorry.
Oh, okay.
She is convinced that the girl who died had a baby that is somewhere and it needs help. It was generic, it was kind of boring, I was tired of it, and it had its good moments, and the story was interesting, and it was interesting to see how it all came together, but it was just super stereotypical, and I didn't really enjoy either of the main characters, so yeah.
This makes me feel better because I didn't like any of the books that I read by Jamie Doe Wright, and everyone loves them. And I'm like, maybe, I don't know. And it has the historical part, so you'd think I would like that. And I mean, the story is interesting.
Yeah, but there's just so much that's annoying.
Oh my goodness. All the main characters are so annoying. All of their love interests are so annoying.
And lastly, I listened to The Elite by Kira Cass. I don't have to say anything about this. I disliked it even more than book 1, and I despised how she just could not pick a guy, so frustrating, and okay, anyway. It was just awful. It was not a good book. It was not a good story. They were not good characters, so there was nothing really even to like or to be, invested in.
So we also wanted to mention what we are currently reading. So I am reading The Fellowship, The Literary Lives of the Inklings by Philip Zaleski and Carol Zaleski. I have been reading this for like all month at least, I think. I'm just reading like a chapter at a time, not very much. It's going to be like a book that I'll be reading for a long time, and I'm really enjoying it. Then I am reading The Shelf Collector by Anthony Doerr. It's okay. And I'm listening to, I think, The Prime Suspect by Agatha Christie. I can't remember what it's called. But I'm listening to that. It is the second book in the Tommy and Tuppence series, and that's really enjoyable.
I'm currently reading Blade of Ash by C.F.E. Black, I think, and enjoying that one. I'm also listening to I Must Betray You by Rita Petties, and I'm like 75% done. Really, really enjoying that one. And I'm also reading Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins, which I had that as like an ebook, and I literally had it for 2 weeks and read 20% of it, but I plan to finish that one up as well when I get the chance. So that was all of the books that we read in November. I feel like this was a bit rambly, but I at least enjoyed some of them, didn't as much enjoy the others, but I really felt like I started to get back into reading this month, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I've read quite a few that I like. I found a new author that I'm really excited to read a bunch of her books, and I think two new favorites actually.
Yeah, so that was all we had to share today. We want to thank you for watching. We are excited to continue with BOOKMAS, and we will see you in the next one.